Today on Uncensored, we're joined by Victor Tay. Victor, you're an activist who runs your own site, Exercising My Rights, is that correct?
Well, I guess for your listeners that don't know me, I actually pastor an independent Bible-believing church in Sydney. It's called the Church in Liverpool. So if they want to find out more about that, it's tcil.org.au. But I suppose I do get involved in activism here and there. So if so what we did is we started a website, or I started a website called Exercising My Rights. And the idea of that website was to sort of express our opposition to the lockdown and sort of share information about coronavirus and the unreliable data behind it, and basically take a stand for our liberties to be able to move and whatnot, and express our opposition to what was going on where they're locking down the country. So we kind of came up with a way, hey, well, we're allowed to exercise during the lockdown. So we thought, hey, why don't we go exercise with the sign, and then hopefully that will sort of spark a trend of other people doing the same as well. And also let other people know that there are people out there that oppose these draconian lockdown laws.
Do you think there's like a little bit of a conspiracy there with like controlling the population?
Yeah, I don't really 100% know. I personally think it could be a multitude of agendas coming together. So, yeah, because it does make you a little bit suspicious, doesn't it? When you think, well, how come, if we've had so many more influenza deaths, and we've had, I guess SARS and MERS and things in the past, and never in our history has a government ever locked down people that are healthy. So why is that? I mean, yeah, I guess there are a lot of conspiracy theories out there. I'm not prepared to really be dogmatic on any of them. Because I personally think there's like a multitude of agendas coming together. Are there evil people in the background pulling the strings and trying to control the population? Yeah, there probably are. But then there are probably also, politicians. The whole America versus China thing could be coming into play. And is it being, is the agenda being pushed from America? Because maybe there are Democrats that don't want Trump to get into power, so they're trying to, make him look bad and how he's handling the pandemic. I think you've also got the forces of, just the people genuinely buying into what the media is telling them and this narrative, and them demanding to be locked down based on the advice of well-meaning, medical experts, because obviously the medical experts disagree on how to go about this. But it seems that right now the medical experts that are in power are the more authoritarian ones. So they may be well-intentioned and then pushing this narrative, and then people just buying into that and demanding from the politicians action. So you got somebody like Scott Morrison, who may be on the fence or maybe sort of more towards liberty, but because the majority in Australia are demanding to be locked down, they're forced to do something. Otherwise, they risk their political career. So I think there's a lot of factors in play. And, I think it would be hard to say it's any one. And I'm definitely hesitant to say that it's something that's hard to prove as well when it comes to, certain theories of, people pulling the strings in the background.
Yeah. Look, I agree with you in the fact that there's a lot of people playing politics with this. Anastasia Palaszczuk is one of them. There was the nurse here in my hometown here that tested positive to COVID-19. So there was this big witch hunt then where, they were going to investigate her and she was going to be prosecuted and blah, 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 blah. And it was just all for the camera, because it turns out this girl did test positive to COVID-19. Guess how many people she spread it to?
0? Oh, okay, there you go. Yeah, I mean, there are people out there that don't even believe it spreads via airborne. But, I don't know so much about the science behind it. But I definitely know that there are different opinions out there.
Well, actually, there was just an article released today from WHO that said that if you're asymptomatic, you may not even be spreading it in general. Have you seen any data on that? And where are you getting your data to support your stance that lockdowns are harmful?
Oh, wait, there were two questions there, right? So one question is, what did you say about WHO? Because I know WHO have changed their stance on a lot of things. And, I even read an article once where somebody's saying, the CDC doesn't say that wearing masks is effective and whatnot. But Yeah, was that your first question? Your first question?
My first question was, there was
so.
information released today that people that are asymptomatic may not be spreading it like they originally thought. Did you get to read any of that today?
No, because I mean, most of my reading I did a couple of months ago, where I sort of already decided what my stance on coronavirus was. So that's why I do sort of see in my Facebook feeds and whatnot these sort of articles pop up, and I don't really spend the time reading into the detail. I just find it humorous that, it goes from panic mode to then, UK government says, it's not a highly infectious disease, and then now you've got it's more infectious than the flu, to now them saying, well, actually, and even asymptomatic people spread it. And now they're saying, you're saying that asymptomatic people don't spread it. So I guess these sort of things don't really come as the surprise to me, that they're realizing that it's not as bad as they initially said it was. But in terms of the data that I look at, I mean, most of the data I've read, I've sort of posted on my website, the main things that sort of convinced me. But yeah, I mean, I think what really flagged with me at the beginning was a piece that Ben Swan had did, where the initial mortality rate for coronavirus was quoted at like 3.4% in the US, and then the numbers that the WHO had used was a case fatality rate number. So they'd used the estimated number of cases to determine a mortality rate, and then to compare it against the seasonal flu and say it was so much more deadly, they'd use the infection mortality rate of the flu. So infection mortality rate is when they estimate the total number of people that are infected and then calculate a percentage based on the number of deaths. So I just found that very misleading from the get-go. And then you have, nobody can really trust the information coming out from China. Then Italy was like the next case. And then you have articles coming out saying, well, the way you code deaths, you don't even have to really prove that they have COVID-19, and they don't differentiate between deaths by COVID-19 and deaths with COVID-19. And then you got the National Health Authority in Italy saying, we're very generous with how we code deaths and attribute them to COVID-19 in Italy. And then we had the same problem in the US, right, where not only were they coding them generously, but there was actually a financial incentive to code them as COVID-19, because I think they were getting a kickback from the government. They were getting funding like of $33,000 or something every time they had recorded a COVID death. So there was sort of a fight from the public health system in America to try and get a piece of that pie. So it's just all these things, and then information starts coming out, like other countries that didn't lock down, that don't have the same death rates, and then you've got experts speaking out against it. You've got Johnny Ioannidis doing his study in I think California, or Santa County, California, or something like that. And plus the Bakersfield's doctors, where their real data is actually showing the infection fatality rate is much more similar to the seasonal flu. So that's the sort of information that I'm pointing to, and I know a lot of, obviously there's arguments about it and things like that, but that's the sort of stuff I've read.
I think it's fair to say the whole thing's kind of turned into a disaster, and most people are kind of now like, it's my bad. I think that what I found interesting about everything was how we found you. Was you went to a protest, and there was some video footage. And can you take us back to that day and what happened?
Yeah, so the way it all started was in terms of this campaign of exercising my rights. Because of the lockdown, obviously you were no longer allowed to gather as groups. So where it really affected our life as Christians is, well, we can't meet for church anymore. And that obviously was a blatant infringement on our rights. So we were trying to figure out, okay, what do we do from here? Because this is sort of an unprecedented type of event where the government's done something like this. So even churches all around Australia, all around the world, I think everyone was a little bit cautious. Like, what would be the, if we continue to go ahead, do we have the right to do that? What would be the repercussions? So we're thinking about what else can we do to express our opposition. And the thought came across my mind is, this seems like the perfect time to do a protest, because you're protesting what the government is trying to do, which is to tell you can't protest, and at the same time you've got political activism. So we thought, oh man, but this is weird because in this instance, you're not even allowed to protest because you're not allowed to gather in groups, or you can only leave your house for certain reasons. So what can we do to sort of spark, like, because when I think of a protest, I think of encouraging others to speak out, showing that hey, there's a lot of people out there that disagree with what's going on as well, and it sort of inspires other people to go, oh look, there's other people that don't agree with what's going on, and it sort of inspires others to speak out in their opposition as well. So when we sort of talked through, hey, what are we actually allowed to do in this lockdown? We started discussing, oh, well, you are allowed to exercise. So, is there any law that says, what you can wear when you exercise? So why don't we go exercise, and we'll wear like T-shirts that tell us we off the hose. And it's like, well, the law doesn't say what you can carry, because obviously when you go exercise, you can carry weights, you can carry whatever you want. You can have a skipping rope. So what's stopping you from carrying a sign and saying, okay, I'm going to go exercise? Yeah, so we're saying, okay, well, why don't we go exercise? So then that's when we were sort of laughing and joking and saying, oh, okay, well, let's call it Exercising My Rights. And what can be the icon or the logo for this campaign? So we thought, hey, why don't we just make it obvious, like wearing this goofy headband, that people, from the 60s and 70s. You imagine those people that are those videos. Or was it from the 80s? Where they got the headbands and the leg warmers. So we sort of thought it'd be cool if people sort of dressed like that and they went out and exercised, made it really obvious they were exercising. So that's where it all started. So when we first went to the city, the police didn't give us any trouble at all for like the first 3 weeks. It wasn't until the 4th week that there was a few people that went to the city to exercise, and because the weeks prior to that, it was mainly just me and my mate and our families were in the city just walking up and down. We weren't really causing much of a stir, and that's when I realized, like week 1, 2, and 3, because I'd made the first couple of videos, I'd shared them, they'd got shared quite a bit, and everyone was like, I could see the comments on the videos like, oh, this is a great idea, hey, everyone should do this, let's go to the city, But then every time I went to the city, there was like nobody there. Like nobody would. So I was going to the city in the first couple of weeks and thinking, surely like there's maybe some people who come out and exercise this week. But there was never anybody there this week. So that's when I realized, oh man, I think people are way more scared than I realized. So we sort of thought at that time, okay, well maybe this trend won't catch on, but we'll just sort of continue and see what happens. So it wasn't until week 4. Week 4, a couple of people, or about 3 people, came along, and that's where you see in the day 4 video. They came along dressed very similar to me with a white shirt. They brought signs, and they were all from one family. So because that was like more adults that came, they all were dressed the same. That's when they initially got stopped by the 2 police that are now famous in my videos, which is Constable Kra and Senior Constable Barnsley. So that day 4 video where they're talking with the police and being told to move on because they're causing fear and alarm, I think that's what helped get the movement message out for the next week. So then day 5, like a lot more people came out because they'd seen that video. But the idea was still, this is not a group gathering. We're not here together. We're not chanting. We're not addressing the crowd. It's just, the idea is if we could turn Parliament House into an exercise spot, the same way like people would go down to the beach and exercise, people, there's just certain parks that people would go to and exercise. So the idea I was trying to spark was, well, you can carry whatever you want to exercise, and if we make Parliament House an exercise spot, then it would have the impact and the effect of a protest, but legally it wouldn't be a protest, so they wouldn't be able to say you can't do it.
Well,
as long as everybody.
In fairness, she said multiple times in that video, I'm exercising my rights. So she was saying your message, but by the time it reached me in America, I didn't know.
Oh, okay. So that's where you guys have to fill me in on how you see it, because I'm assuming
So
everybody
I'm
knew
just thinking like you guys,
doing.
we thought, you know what I mean? We're seeing this video as this woman. You guys are all protesting. We're like, okay, why does she got her kid at a protest? And now, like, I'm hearing all this, and I'm like, this guy's a genius. exercising her rights. He's putting on shirt. Like, now it's making sense. She's taking her kid to go
Right,
exercise.
like when we hear
I'm like,
exercising my rights, we're thinking,
I'm like, he's a genius. I'm like, yes. I'm like, oh!
Yeah, so the idea was, can we do it in a way where they couldn't stop us? And that's why, you know, people have asked me, like, oh, you know, why did you give the cops your name and everything like that? Why don't you have a right to not? And my thought was, well, my fight isn't about whether or not they can take my details. My fight is, will they be able to stop me using the COVID restrictions? And in the video, it shows that they couldn't, right? They couldn't. But I got arrested for another reason. But we'll get there in a moment. But that's interesting that you say that, yeah, because that's what the police were trying to push. See, they realized that they couldn't stop me exercising. They couldn't stop them exercising. They couldn't tell us what to carry. And everybody that had come sort of knew, like, that was their legal loophole, right? That they could be there. And because, you know, and even if it was a protest, I mean, I'm not against people bringing their kids to protest. I think you know, it depends on how violent you think it's going to be. Obviously, if it's an illegal protest and you think the cops are going to do something, obviously you'd make plans for your children. But I think that's why you know, Renee is not like a seasoned protester, right? And you know, she's never been to other protests, let alone violent protests. And then because she thought, well, this is just going for a walk, like nobody expected the police really to do anything. Right. So she's like, well, I'll just go to the city, go for a walk. We weren't gathering. We weren't really, I mean, people were stopping and talking with each other every now and then, but you know, there was so little people there on that day. I mean, there was maybe like 20 of us.
When you say exercising your rights, we're just thinking, you know, it's your right to protest. And we're not, you know, thinking exercising my rights. So we're like, we're watching this woman with this small child, and we're like, what is she doing?
I blame Katie.
Why would you bring a child to a protest? Because they can turn ugly so quickly. And we're just like,
and that's why that's the narrative they wanted you to think, to paint her as this terrible mom. But
well, see,
the reality of it was, yeah. So the reason why it was called Exercising My Rights was because it was about the exercise, and that's why they're trying to say it's a protest, but I'm saying, well, we're just there exercising, and that's why my slogan was, muscles are like rights. If you don't use them, you lose them. Because, you know, I was sort of playing on the fact that, hey, we're there to exercise our muscles. So they just happen to be like rights. Rights, if you don't use them, you lose them. But
I wish we would have had you on sooner so that we could have like pushed this over here in America, so that like everybody that's like racist over here could just shut up. Like, we ain't protesting, we're exercising.
And
Victor, why do you think that you guys were targeted by the police, and you know, and there was arrests made? But why? What's the difference between now that the state's saying it's fine for the Black Lives Matter protest to go ahead? They actually okayed it. They actually said, "Oh, social distancing laws don't apply to this one protest." So how can they pick and choose what you're allowed to protest, what you're not? Like, I just think it's a little bit.
Yeah, that's why this,
you know?
this is, I guess you can see politics at play here, right? Where they're doing what people is more popular. Because you see, just going back to day 5 now, you know, I acknowledge that I put the police in between a rock and a hard place, right? Because I understand that, you know, a lot of people exercising in one area, carrying signs, can look like something that it might not be. So that's what they were struggling with, right? Because they're saying, oh, you know, it kind of looks like an organized protest. But then when everyone's saying, well, we didn't come together, we're just here exercising. So what can they do, right? They're trying to condemn you for something that you're not saying you're doing. Because I wasn't organizing a gathering there. They just all happened to want to do what I was doing. So that's why they were trying to figure out how to stop us, well, to stop me. And that's why you see that back and forth on day 5, where they're saying, well, why are you carrying this sign? So that's where I'm standing my ground, saying, well, you can't legally stop me from exercising here with my family and carrying and dressing however I want. So eventually they basically, I think they basically get to the point, well, the sergeant gets to the point, well, okay, well, it's not that many people here, so just let people exercise. So that's why I think the police were a little concerned, because they didn't want it to grow to the size of something where, because normally when you want to organize a protest, the reason why you get a permit is so that they know how many people are coming, they know how many resources to allocate there, they know, hey, if you're gonna block the streets and whatnot, then we can close the roads and all that sort of stuff. So the permit is not about so much restricting somebody's right to protest. It's more about working with the police officers to do it safely, right? Because what if like multiple groups want to do it in one area at the same time and they have no notice and it just causes chaos? So it's to me it's like that. So I can understand if it grew to, if it did grow to that point, then they would be concerned, and that's what they didn't know about, right? Because how do they know whether a movement's going to take off or not? But what didn't work in their favor was the fact that it didn't really take off, right? There was maybe only 20 to 30 people exercising there. But what had happened was, if you'd seen the footage, the highest rank officer there, which was Inspector O'Donnell, she was the one that had stopped Renee at point, right? Like Renee doesn't believe, you have to, in terms of exercising your rights. So, really what I was doing on the day, I was exercising my right to exercise. That was the joke. That, yeah, obviously people are going out there thinking, exercising my right to protest and speak out, free speech. So Renee comes sort of from that angle where it's, if I'm not doing anything wrong, I have the right to not give you my name. What people may not know in New South Wales, and whether they believe it's a legitimate law or not, in New South Wales, if a police officer suspects you of breaking a law, they have the power under New South Wales law, and like I said, whether you think that's a legitimate law or not is another question, to ask you for your details. So they can ask you for your name, your date of birth, and your address. Now, some people are concerned about giving their name, details, and address to the police because, like, what are they going to do with that? Are they going to stalk me? Are they going to harass me? And some people believe, well, they don't even have a right to ask for that unless they can prove that I'm doing something wrong. So I know for the Millions March, people were advising people, hey, if the police ask for your details, you can give it conditionally. Like, you can ask first, like, what crime am I being suspected of? What law are you suspecting me of breaking? And if they don't have, you could have that back and forth. And if they, you show them that they don't have reasonable cause to think you're breaking a crime, then you don't need to give them your details. But the way Renee had gone about it was, well, I don't have to give it to you at all. So that's where there's that sort of like the fight between the police, right? Well, when they believe they do have the right to ask for your details, and they can arrest you for not giving your details, and she's saying, well, I don't believe you have that right. So that's why the police commissioner can get on 2GB and say, well, how they handled it was fine because they did have the right to arrest her if they didn't have the details. But what people are upset about is how the way in which they arrested it. I mean, even if you agree that, okay, maybe she didn't give the details, the police have the right to arrest her, did they have to arrest her in that way? So I firmly believe that her sort of showing up Inspector O'Donnell in front of her constables, that sort of made O'Donnell, which is that lady, want to make an example of her. So I think that's
the one, Jeffrey, that you kept saying was very homely.
That was our exact stance, was that Renee had...
Yeah, she pissed her off. She pissed her off.
Yeah, so it's pretty obvious, and that's what people are upset about, because, you can tell that, she made her look silly, and then O'Donnell went away to get. You can actually see in the video say, I'm going to get permission to arrest you. So she's gone away. Half an hour later, somehow gotten permission. And when Renee is actually leaving, right? Because the police didn't really cause a fuss until about 3:20 or something like that, 3:30. And then when she's leaving at like 3:50, that's when like O'Donnell tries to make a point to go and try and arrest her. And she's already on her way out. So she's actually leaving and saying, no, I'm going home. She's crossing the road, and the police drag her back to the sidewalk to, make an example of her.
I was just going to ask you to fill in the blanks, because the video that we saw, sure, we see Renee telling her, have a nice day, I'm walking away. That's it. And then the next thing we see is this, a confrontation between O'Donnell and Renee. and we're not sure what happens from the time that Renee says goodbye and the confrontation starts. So you're saying that you guys were just going about your business and she was just about to leave and O'Donnell walked up to her.
Yeah, so I'll try and start from so while we're walking up and down Parliament House, you can imagine it's quite a big long pathway. There's probably about 20 people I see in the area that are, probably doing similar to what I'm doing, right? So that's why there are times in my live stream where you look behind me in front of Parliament House and there's nobody there, right? Because if you were actually there, you'll realize how silly it is for the police to say you're causing fear and alarm, right? There's more people in a shopping center and all that sort of stuff. So it's like, but they're trying to think of ways to move us on, right? If they can't say we're not exercising, because everybody is. So the police try multiple times to come across and sort of section people off to sort of like question them, because if they can question you and you admit to not exercising, right, then they have reasonable cause to move you on, right? Because you don't have a reasonable excuse to be away from your home. So they tried that multiple times. If you actually watch my live stream, you see at certain times they come and speak to people. So Renee talking to Inspector O'Donnell is actually the second time she's approached by police, because some constables approach her before, try and stop her from doing what she's doing, and they just end up leaving her and let her going about her day. So Sergeant O'Donnell stops her later, and that's about the same time that Inspector O'Donnell stops her and is talking to her. That's about the same time that the cops stop me, where you see that back and forth between me and the police and between me and the sergeant. So at that time, she's actually over having that first conversation with O'Donnell, where she's then allowed to keep walking, and Inspector O'Donnell says, well, I'm going to get permission to arrest you. So Renee comes over to see what's happening where I'm talking with the sergeant, and that's when she even talks to the sergeant, and the sergeant's fine with, like, you guys just keep on exercising, do whatever you want. So about half an hour later, that first clip that you referred to, so the two clips that you see her speaking to O'Donnell and then she's getting dragged, there's actually half an hour between that. Right, so you add another half hour where she's walking and doing whatever, and then by that time, after that sort of climax with the police where I'm talking to them, when you get to like the end of a protest and people are just sort of hanging around and most people have gone home, and that's kind of what it felt like then. It's like most people had already left, because most people had come from like 2:30 to 3:30, and they had already left, and it was just like the stragglers going. So everyone's saying goodbye.
They've exercised for the day. They've got their energy.
Exactly.
Out. They are ready to go home.
Yeah.
They've got their workout in.
I'm even saying goodbye to people. I'm saying, I'll see you later. Like, that's why I didn't realize Renee had got arrested, because I had said goodbye to her and I was talking with somebody else, and I thought she had left and gone home. So when she was leaving to go home, that's when they stopped her.
So the conflict was literally over and she just started it back up. O'Donnell did.
Yes, so it was sort of dead, and everyone that was there was like, "Hey, see you later," and and then she tried to get her when she was on her way home. She was leaving.
Well, this is the thing, though. There's a lot of hypocrisy. There's so many double standards with how the police approach all of these different things. Like, I personally felt that level of aggression towards Renee was completely unwarranted. We could all tell just by watching that video, even though we didn't know the whole story, that cop had a chip on her shoulder. You could really see it in the video.
It was
and we addressed that when we did. Yeah, like Jeff had a big spiel about it, didn't you, Jeffrey? But like, I think it's
like she was. I felt like it really had to do with, like, there was a woman more attractive. Like, I just, I call.
I don't think it had anything to do with looks or anything like that.
I don't know about that.
I think it's exactly what Victor said, that Renee kind of showed her up in front of her people, and she felt stupid and had to.
And she was
kind of man up. Okay.
And you got to remember, she's the highest rank officer that was there at the time. So that's what people don't realize. She was like the boss on the floor until they got Renee into the car. A superintendent showed up. So that's why she was sort of, you know what I mean? Like, she was the one in charge.
Right.
And a beautiful woman just made her look like an idiot. You telling me she's not going to be mad when she's homely? Come on.
All right. That's
I'm just saying, I'll be the mean one. I'll be the mean
She doesn't
girl.
get a choice what to wear, though. She's given a uniform.
It don't matter. She's ugly inside. She's ugly inside.
And my big thing about the whole thing is, as a mother, watching this poor child be ripped out of his mother's arms, that was totally unnecessary.
She's the devil on the inside. That's what I'm saying. How could you watch a mother kid get lady? You need. You know what? Maybe you could send her some literature.
I just
definitely she's not using her head at that point, I think, because think about it, right? Even if you wanted to arrest Renee, right? Even if you said, okay, I'm going to make a point of you, I'm going to arrest you. Why would you do it in the way you did it? Like, why not just detain her, wait till she calms down, get it through to her saying, look, you're not going anywhere. You will be coming with us. Obviously, it'll take more time. You can have her child sit in the car with her and say, we have to, you could have done it a way different way. Like what was the rush to throw her into the back of the car? I don't understand.
I think that's what annoyed us a lot too, because that little kid now has scarred from the event, because you'll never forget that. Watching people manhandling your mum and throwing her into a car and separating you.
Like, this woman's ego was more important than a little child's mental health. Like, at the end of the day, like, her ego was more important than putting a little kid through major trauma. Like, this really wasn't about Renee for me. I mean, it was, but you know what I'm saying? Like, this cop, her ego was more important than what she just put a little kid through. Like, what's wrong
you can't really...
with you? Who hurt you that you thought that letting all that happen was okay?
Yeah, and you can't even really justify it for public safety, right? I mean,
this is
that's the only reason why she's suspicious.
Well, Renee posed no threat. She posed no threat. She was so calm. She was very, very passive in every interaction she had. So for that level, and actually, James, can you show the clip of the guy from the protest yesterday, where he actually literally attacked the police? He got on a police car, he was attacking the police, and he did not get arrested. He got detained. He did not get charged.
What country is this?
This is in Sydney. No, Brisbane, I think.
Oh, Brisbane. Yeah, I was going to say the police cars.
Yeah, Brisbane.
You guys have way cooler cop cars.
I mean, you could argue that there's a gender inequality there.
But I'm just saying, he didn't get charged.
He jumped on a police car and nothing happened. Not even
No.
The police are probably staying in there. They're probably worried, right? That's why they're not getting out of the car.
Like, I want to know why your cop cars look like something out of Jurassic Park and we get Fords.
It's probably more rural areas, maybe in Queensland. I don't know.
Well, the point I think was that the protests going on right now are about police overstepping their boundaries and police using excessive force where it's just absolutely not necessary. This is obviously not in the same vein, but they were using excessive force for a very passive woman who was totally willing to walk away and say, have a nice day. We can end this now and just kind of move on. And you even said she was going home. So what is the point in getting so vicious with ripping her child out of her arms, kicking and screaming, and then just kind of like trying to pull him completely away from her, not even letting her comfort her child? Like, there's absolutely no point to it. And this is police.
Yeah, and they did it the day before Mother's Day. That's why everything was just terrible in how it worked out. Oh,
it's insane. And then, so tell us about, you got arrested.
Yeah, so this is what was weird about me getting arrested, because obviously the younger constable tried to give me a move on, and I think he was trying to enforce it. And then the sergeant came over and basically was trying to explain why the move on was being given. But then eventually he just says, you can continue to exercise, right? Because he can't really justify his move on. So like I said, that's about half an hour before Renee gets arrested. So after that, I think things are dying down. I'm walking and just talking to other people. The police are basically just leaving me alone. And I'm on the other side of Parliament House talking with somebody that was there at the time as well. And then all of a sudden I hear screaming and everything at the other side. And I'm just thinking, I thought thought everything was all good. My initial thought was, okay, maybe some guy had said something to the police, smart to the police, and then they're trying to arrest him, and then the women are screaming at this guy getting arrested, right? That's my initial thought. So when I go and I hear somebody calling my name, right? And I don't know what really I can do about it, right? But then somebody's calling my name, so I look over and I walk down, and I realize the police had barricaded off, where you can't get any closer. They'd formed like a line. So that's where you see people coming up, standing behind the police. And that's when I realize a mother is getting arrested, but I don't know who, because I can't really make out what's going on in the distance. So I don't know what made it escalate, because like I said, everyone was saying goodbye, everyone was going home. So I thought, well, I'll try and go down the other side of the street where the police aren't, so that I can take some live footage and show people what's going on. So I crossed the road at the traffic light. I'm running down, and then the police officers who were on the barricade that knew I was there as well, so they knew I'd not left the area, they crossed the road to intercept me and then say to me like I didn't comply with their move-on order, and then they just arrest me and throw me and put me into the car. So that's where you see me going like, why are you moving on? Like your sergeant has already said it's fine to keep exercising. But the thing is, I don't think they realized that that's how that conversation ended. I think they thought that the sergeant had just enforced the move on and everyone had moved on. They didn't realize that he had said, well, then just continue exercising. You're all good to keep doing what you. So that's what I think has happened. I don't know what's going to happen out in the watch, but when I read their notes on the court order, it sounds like they assumed that I had complied with their move on, as opposed to still being there because the sergeant had not moved us on. So I think they just maybe thought I was going to. I think what was going through their head, and this is just my assumption, is when they saw me running down the other side of the road with a couple of other people, that we would like run to Renee's aid, right? But we were just trying to run down to get some footage from the other side of the road, right? Because I think it would be kind of silly if somebody's getting arrested.
I feel like that's kind of what they wanted to do too, by arresting her, to incite, other people there, because, they picked on the most vulnerable person there, really, like a woman with a child. And I think they wanted the people to react in a way that then would justify them arresting everybody.
Well, I don't know about in that particular instance. I mean, I know people say, do police do that? I'm not going to comment on whether they do that as a whole or whether that is one tactic that they use. But I think in this particular instance, I think it worked against them. So I don't think, they did that on purpose. Like we were talking about, I think this was like one lady's personal vendetta against a lady that blew out of proportion, that causes the police to go into PR mode to try and not make everyone hate them. And that's why they painted it as it's an illegal protest. And, Renee's got this, she's running her business illegally, and all, they're trying to smear her to justify what they did the day before Mother's Day. So my arrest was very unglamorous because it was on the other side of the road. Nobody there even knew I got arrested besides my family, because they had saw me cross the road and run down the road. But because all the attention was on Renee, I was on the other side of the road. They arrested me. They put me into the paddy wagon. And when I got whisked off, nobody knew where I had gone, right? So besides the people that were on the live stream. So that's sort of what happened to me on the other side of the road. I think the police thought that I was trying to get involved, which I wasn't. I was just trying to get some footage, because I didn't think it was wise to get in there. Because like you said, if people start behaving violent, it just justifies more what the police are doing. So I didn't want to add to that.
Well, and I understand getting the footage. Trust me.
Yeah. So just as well, there were people close up. I don't know what footage I added, because I was much further away and I came late to the party. I didn't realize what had happened until after I got out of the station, out of custody. And then I watched what happened. And then because when I got to the station and I was in my cell, and then Renee comes out, and I'm like, you got arrested? I'm like, I thought you had already gone home. Like, I had no idea that was the lady that got arrested. And I was like, I didn't know what had happened. So then when I got out,
in your live stream too, Victor, like the police are referring to you by your name. So did they just know you from that day, or had they been aware of you? Because I just thought it was very, very chatty in the way they were just like, oh, hey, Victor, how are you going? And blah, 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 blah. So are you quite known to the police prior, and obviously since the event, but prior to it?
No, because see, what happened was in week 4, when they had approached these other people that had came to exercise, and I'd made that video, right? I made a video showing the interaction between the police and them, and without, because we were there recording it, so there was a bit of a interaction between the two police officers, some other people, and us. So I'd used that footage to say this is what happened day 4. So that day 4 video got shared like over 1,000 times. Right, so when that happens, obviously the police officers in that station all seen the footage, right? And my name is out there, like when my videos, I introduce myself. Hi, I'm Victor Tay. It's on the website, so they know who I am, right? But week 5, when I went out, they were waiting for me. So when I got there at 2:00, they were waiting for me to question me. So that's when they'd asked for my details, and because I didn't want to have that fight with them, I gave them my address. I gave them my date of birth, but they had already known it anyway. They'd looked it up somewhere. So they're saying, oh, we're just confirming your details. So it's like, okay, well, I gave them my new address, said that's my birthday. So I'd cut that out of the video. But in terms of my name, they'd already known me from the week prior. So that's why the video you see, they already know who I am.
Yeah. So I was going to say, like, moving forward, though, do you think any other protests you partake in, you'll be someone that they will probably fixate on? Like they will sort of hinder that?
No, because I think they only had a problem with me because I was, like sort of closely, they're trying to say I was breaking the public health order. So their task is to try and enforce it, and I wasn't. So that's where the sort of battle was, right? Is am I breaking the public health order or not? I don't think it's anything personal, because obviously when I speak to the police at the station afterwards, it's not that I have, like, I'm not anti-police. There are people out there that, like now with the BLM protests, they're saying defund the police. Like, I think police should exist. I don't have a problem with police enforcing the laws. That's why I just think it's unfortunate that, they are having to enforce laws that go contrary to our rights in this country. So, it's to me, it's nothing personal, and that's why I'm not upset at them. But they're obviously challenging their reasoning, because I'm hoping that they won't necessarily enforce the laws the way they think they should be enforced. Do you know what I mean? That's why I'm just saying we're on different sides of a political fence. So it's not that I have an issue with them. And in fact, the Sergeant Barnsley told me that Senior Constable Barnsley told me that he actually is part of the team that helps give permits to protests. So, you know what I mean? If you have a protest, I don't think, like, police aren't against people having protests. Like you know what I mean? Like they will help you to facilitate a protest. Mm-hmm. When it came to week 5, the rules in New South Wales had actually changed. So whereas in week 5, you could only leave your home if you had a reasonable excuse, which one was exercising. Week 6, when more people came out because of Renee's arrest, the laws had slightly changed. Now you could have a public gathering of 10 people as long as you were social distancing. So now you no longer needed a reasonable excuse to be out. Whereas the week before, you needed an excuse to be out. That's why the conversation was, are you exercising or not? If I'm exercising, I could leave my home. The week after, you can leave your home for any reason because you can be in a group of 10. So then it was a question of, well, now it's very difficult for them to enforce those laws. So that's why they really didn't do anything on week 6, and they couldn't from that day onwards. And then when you had the large march at the Millions March, which was like a sort of a against mandatory vaccinations march and anti-lockdown, as long as the organizers could show that they were trying to get people to stay in groups of 10 and socially distanced, then that's why they were given that permit. Now with I don't know all the details behind Black Lives Matter, but that's why I don't necessarily think they are treating protests any different just for Black Lives Matter. I think it's because they initially said it was going to be a small group. So just like the Millions March in Sydney had about 2,000 people, 2,000 to 3,000 people, even though the media reported it as hundreds. But they didn't really do anything about people even, when the speeches were on, everybody was shoulder to shoulder, and I think they didn't really want to cause a fuss, but they knew that amount of people was going to go. I think with the Black Lives Matter one is they thought, only a few hundred people were going to go, and then it ended up being like tens of thousands of people. So I don't know the politics there in terms of why Gladys, they said yes, and they said no, and then, so I think she's now in a bad position, right? Because she's pushed the lockdown so hard, seemed to be hypocritical to just allow people to just gather in tens of thousands of numbers when she's tried to destroy Australian businesses and destroy the economy. Same with any protest, like people come for different reasons, right? So same with Black Lives Matter, like people have different reasons why they're supporting the movement. And one is, I think everybody would be against police brutality. Obviously the police are there to protect people and defend our rights. When they start oppressing people and being authoritarian, I don't think anyone's for that. Whether there's an argument on, whether they're targeting a certain color of skin over another, I think maybe that's another issue that's contentious, because some people don't believe they are necessarily targeting, the stats don't show that. But yeah, I suppose I'm not an expert on that. I mean, I completely deny the existence of different races. I think we're all the one race. So anything that I think further pushes people apart on race boundaries, I think is foolish, right? It's just what does the color of your skin matter, when you're dealing with different human beings? So I did want to say that the police here in Australia, I think, are very different, like what Luke was saying, because I know some people in the police force as well. And, that's why I kind of doubt sometimes that the police want to, I know in New South Wales anyways, they want to create a big public relations uproar over something that they do, because the mindset that seems to be here is they don't want things to get into the media. They don't want things to go viral. That's sort of they don't want those things to happen. So they wouldn't, intentionally cause it. Right. But that's just what I've heard.
I wouldn't have
all the police officers that were there when Renee got arrested. The week after, there was a few inspectors that were across the road and a few constables in the distance. But I think it was maybe one police officer that I recognized. So I don't know whether they just took them all off the job. That's why the commissioner comes on saying, yeah, I defend what they do. They went about it with great discretion and everything. And yet the next week, none of the police officers that dealt with it the week before were there the week after.
Yeah, she's sitting at a desk. She's sitting at a desk, probably wishing she didn't have such an ugly heart.
Possibly.
How are Renee and her son? Are they doing okay now?
Yeah, I think they're fine. I mean, I don't know what effect it'll have on her son moving forward, but I think everybody, I don't think it'll necessarily define what his future is, right? I think people are, because when you watch it, obviously it pulls the heartstrings and it's pretty intense, but at the same time, I don't think any one event in your life will destroy your life in the future, right? Like if the mom's supportive and explain what's going on, like the kid's gonna be able to deal with it and just see it as something that happened and understand why it happened.
Well, I'm glad they're doing better.
So it's just about the court case now. I think they're trying to take, because normally you sue the New South Wales police, but I think her lawyers are actually going to go after each individual police officer. So that's going to set a precedent. If they win, that's going to set a precedent that the police officer themselves will be liable for the actions they do on the job and not just the police department. So it would be interesting to see what comes of that court case.
Well, thanks so much for joining us, mate. It was really great, and you brought so much insight to everything as well, because, I was coming into this not even knowing what we were going to really chat about. I had the list of questions, which you've already addressed as you chatted, and I think it's really opened our eyes to where you guys stand, and it really frames what happened to Renee as well in the right context. Yeah,
and I think that's what I really want to help her the most in, right? Because if she's in this situation, I'm trying to help, tell people what really happened, because you can only get the message out so far, right? So if other people know what's going on, then that might change the public perception of how people see what happened. So appreciate you guys for looking into it.
It definitely changed my mind on the situation for the most part.
Great.
Absolutely.